subject, and I'd like to invite up Rick Sterling, who's the Vice President of Strategy and Insights at the local Search Association, and he's a leading advocate for blogs, search engines, and marketing land. He has more than 15 years in the business and has written and researched about digital around the world, and he's going to continue with this session.
Where's the applause? Thank you. All right. I'm a relatively informal person, as some of you who know me know already. So this session is a very short session. It's a half an hour. The last session was an excellent discussion that got started many of the questions that will continue into this session. I have with me the CEO of Camilio, Ziv, and he will be talking in the second half of this session about some of the same sales challenge issues and what to do about how to present a complex portfolio of products going forward. But first, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview and then talk about some research that we did in conjunction with Camilio to address some of the complexity in the marketplace, which we heard about last night on the consumer side, the customer journey, and we just heard about today in terms of all the products and how to sell them and how to position them. I just said this. And we hope that, as you just did with the question and answer portion of the last session, you'll engage with us in a discussion and debate about this. There's a longer version of my slide presentation that will be available that has more consumer data, but in the interest of time, we shortened it a bit here. So as you know, mobile is the chief method of internet access across Europe and across many of the regions that you represent, certainly in North America. People now use mobile to get internet content much more frequently than the desktop, which now represents, in this is a US slide from Comscore, only a third of time spent with digital media. However, most time with digital media is in apps. And that represents challenges for each of the publishers in this room, which is not the subject of this session, but we can talk about if there's interest. This slide from a Google study reflects the complexity of the consumer journey. We heard about that last night a bit. Many sources used before people make offline purchases. Now, how many people in the room are aware of what's going on with location analytics or location history using mobile devices to determine where people go in the world, doing audience profiling, and then online to offline attribution? Is anybody aware of that kind of activity? So a number of people. This is quite a radical development, one of the most significant things happening in the market. I can talk about that later in more detail, but it gives more transparency and more options to the media provider, and it's for the first time we can see what the influence of digital media are on offline purchase behavior and even transactions. So Google and Facebook are investing very heavily in this online to offline tracking and attribution. So people are familiar with Google Store visits. How many in the room have heard of that? One, two, tentatively, a few. So what Google is doing is using Android devices and location history in the aggregate. They will say it's privacy compliant in order to determine who's seen an ad and who's shown up in a store. And over the last 2 years, they've tracked more than 1 billion online to offline store visits, and they characterize themselves as the largest omni-channel measurement provider in the world now. And this is going to be expanded to small businesses. And one of the ways in which they are going to do this is with beacons. So for in-store precision, they're going to distribute beacons. They still are working out certain things to determine that somebody came into the store in combination with other methods. So this is quite dramatic. So on the one hand, you'll have Google. On the other hand, you'll have Facebook showing businesses who was exposed to an ad and who came into the store. And this is something that all of you as publishers need to be aware of and prepared for. Because if you're not offering more tangible metrics to your customers, there'll be more churn effectively. So this is just an example of beacons is a huge topic, indoor location a huge topic. In Amsterdam, there's an open beacon project going on under the auspices of Google in conjunction with the city. It's about public transportation. It's rolling out now. It's a very interesting project. So all of this, as we heard last night, and to some degree today, creates more complexity for the local business. There are many more channels, many more products to deal with. In the US market in 2013, small business owners were using 6 marketing methods, including traditional, to reach their customers. That's now gone up to virtually 8. And it creates all kinds of problems around education, the sales process, and ROI. So most local businesses don't know what's effective. They don't know which of these channels is working. And so when you don't have a clear sense of the value of your media investment, you churn out of the programs. For whom in the room is digital churn or non-renewal a significant problem? So everybody's retaining all their advertisers. No problem. Okay, thank you. This was a good session. This is a widespread problem in North America. Even for publishers who have very high retention on the print side, it's a major problem. And so what we see here is one study reflected also in many other studies that illustrate the nature of the causes. Poor results, or the perception of poor results, poor service, pricing, and so on. So we heard about service the last time. That's a major factor here. So I have written a white paper that was a byproduct of the research that Camilio and the LSA did, and it's called the customer funnel, which is the concept we're going to get into now. Is this a better framework for local marketing, small business marketing, versus selling an endless list of point solutions? And some people talked about how they were transitioning away from a product list into something more like this. This is free. It's available for download. You'll see the URL shortly. So everybody can read it and tell me I'm crazy, but we'll see. So hopefully we'll have a lively discussion about this. So what went into this report is 2 surveys. We surveyed LSA members, people on the list, 110 providers of SME or SMB marketing services, and then we surveyed 300 small businesses from North America. And we asked them 2 parallel sets of questions to understand what the perception was on the industry side and what the experience was on the advertiser side. 84% of these industry respondents sold directly to small businesses. We basically screened out the other group that didn't have direct exposure. This is just to give you a sense of who these respondents were. Most of them had advertisers sort of polarized, below 500 euro per month or above 800 euro per month. So there's a distribution of advertisers here across these providers. The small businesses had been in business from 5 to 20 years, but a third of them less than 5 years, mostly fewer than 10 employees, and about 20% were sole proprietors or practitioners, and most of them spent less than 900 euros a month. There's a distribution. So small spending, relatively small spending, and small firms. Now, interestingly, you may find this kind of controversial or interesting. We heard a little bit about self-service. The majority of these small businesses were not working with any provider. They were DIY or trying to do it themselves. Those that were working with a third party, whether that be an agency or a publisher or somebody else, a consultant of some kind, were using 1 to 2 providers of marketing services. So this is quite an interesting thing and consistent across North America. Many studies reveal these kinds of numbers. We asked both sides, what are the essential marketing methods that you think must be used to reach the customer? And we see surprising, or maybe it's not surprising, unanimity across them in terms of the top methods. Websites, SEO, social media, email, and then on the industry side, reputation management. These slides will all be available to you whenever they're being distributed by Cinda. And so the subsequent lists are different. You can see that they start to diverge in terms of importance and priority. But this was interesting that there was general equivalence at the top. We also asked small businesses, where would you spend more money? If you had twice your budget to spend, where would you deploy that? Where would you distribute that? Search engine optimization, their website, social media. Again, pretty consistent. But then interestingly, in the 4th position, CRM. Now we didn't define this, so this was left up to the small business to import their own understanding. But it's interesting that that showed up in the 4th position. If you had more money to spend, you'd spend it there. So then we asked a number of questions about the customer journey or the customer funnel, and we simplified it for the survey into 3 stages: attract, convert, and retain. And I realize this is a little bit of a dense slide, but we asked the industry, is it important to address every stage of this funnel to have an effective marketing program? 83% said yes, it was. And then interestingly, 70% almost said, we do discuss this idea during the sales process. How many of you in your organizations talk about the customer journey in your sales process with small business advertisers? Raise your hand high, be proud. All right, a few people. And then 80% said that it influenced their product development. They're thinking about their products. Now, how many industry executives and sales reps think that the small business understands this concept of the customer journey or the customer funnel? 56% said they don't understand it, despite the fact that they include it in their sales process and they're thinking about their products and their organization, their products. On the other side, the small businesses, more than slightly over half, said they were aware of this idea. And then we asked some follow-up questions. Which stages, attract, retain, and convert, or attract, convert, and retain, of the funnel do you emphasize, small business owner, in your marketing? The emphasis was on new customers primarily. However, only 18% said it wasn't necessary to emphasize all stages equally. So in other words, intellectually they say it's important to do the whole thing, but they're really only working on, focused on new customers. And why? Because they don't have enough time or money to do the full process. We also asked them, would you prefer an integrated suite of tools, an integrated marketing platform? Do you think that would make your business or your marketing more effective or more efficient? And 62% of the small businesses said yes, it would, at least conceptually. Among those working with multiple providers, the majority said that cost of working with multiple providers, time, and the complexity of learning these different tools and systems was a problem and a barrier to success. So this is quite interesting. They say that they want to address all stages of the funnel or the customer journey equally, but they're not. They think a single tool, I mean, many of you use the one-stop shop language, would be more effective. So we're coming to the discussion portion here very quickly. But the final couple of slides we asked for the industry, many people have had to work with white label solution providers because they haven't developed technology in-house. So how many of you are working with multiple vendors? 60% said 3 or more, and 23% said 5 or more. And then you get the problem of integrating all these tools. How do they all work together? Do you have a sort of a unified back end or something where these things can interact and you can get a coherent view of the customer journey and analytics? And these are the challenges on the right that they identified in working with multiple providers. Internal technology, multiple systems, reporting, and so on. So lots of challenges. Nonetheless, when asked, would you prefer to work with a single provider who could do it all? They said, no, we prefer to choose our own solutions and integrate them ourselves. How integrated are all these systems? Somewhat integrated was the dominant example. And here's the report. It goes into more detail. I can also provide more of the study. We only saw a small part of that as part of the slides that you'll receive. So the thesis of this report is that this process of selling an ever-increasing list of products no longer works. It doesn't work for the sales rep. It doesn't work for the local business. There's too much complexity in the system. How do you assimilate new products? The churn rate is evidence of the problems with this approach. And again, in the earlier session, we heard a good deal about trying to change that process. It takes too much time to educate everybody. So the thesis here is that a CRM-like total customer journey approach to the product and to sales is really what the market needs, and that the market cannot stay where it is and for publishers to see success. So this is what, again, if you want that URL and you want to download it, it's thelsa.org, customer-funnel. And we're starting to see this kind of language from various companies. different companies, HubSpot and many others, Wix, trying to do this all-in-one unified platform strategy, customer journey kind of language. Okay, now discussion, Q&A. So, how many of you found this controversial? Anyone? You find it controversial? Okay. How many people disagree with the idea, in the central idea that you need to transition into a much more holistic customer journey scenario? Anyone disagree? No? Again, everyone agree with this? Not controversial at all? Okay, all right. So we want to have a discussion now with you, but first we want, Ziv, maybe you can give us a little bit about your background and Camilio, and then we'll get into questions.
Sure. So I'm the Chief Marketing Officer and Product Officer at Camilio. We've been providing this industry with digital presence and marketing solutions from 2010. And about 3 years ago, we've embarked on a risky venture, maybe a bit crazy, of trying to come up with a product that would actually unify all of the different tools that your SMB needs in order to drive online success into one fully integrated platform. And we've called it Camilio. Since launching Camilio in 2015, we've been seeing double of our revenues and double of our company size for 2 consecutive years. We feel that, at the start, it was an issue of educating and, trying to explain to an industry that was selling mainly websites, maybe top of the funnel type of products that they need to do something else. But we are now seeing more and more of the industry following suits, jumping on the wagon. We have, of course, a major US customer which embraced this first, and we've been happy to see that with 1 year since launching the product, they rose from 0 to 35,000 SMB accounts now on the platform.
So I want to ask you, as people are starting to think about questions, what was we had a discussion. The genesis of this report was that Ziv and I were having a discussion about the nature of the market and what needed to happen. And so we decided to do this research. But I want to ask you, what were your observations, or what are the problems that you saw with the current situation, or then the current situation roughly a year ago, that caused you to advocate this approach?
So, at first we saw an industry on market service providers that are, on the one hand, selling kind of top of the funnel product, mainly websites.
And what do you mean by top of the funnel?
Mainly websites, and then some premium traffic products like PPC and SEO, but again, not for the wide base of the customers. But on the other hand, we saw a sales force that is promising results, business results to customers. And we found that this approach a bit disconnected, because essentially, you're selling a website, and then what? If this is really the only thing that you sell. Harold actually said that the website is the center of everything, and we fully agree, but it is the center of the wheel. It needs the spokes, it needs a lot of things around it in order to eventually provide real value for the SMBs. We've also seen a lot of churn in the industry, and we suspected that this is because of this disconnect between what companies are promising, or the talk that they use when they're selling to customers, and the fact that essentially they're just addressing the front end of the funnel and totally missing out on the other stages of the funnel, which is conversion and retention.
Does anybody have questions?
Before we have questions, I want Ziv to explain what the problem is with focusing on the top of the funnel, because I think it's a fairly profound challenge in the market. Do we have anybody from Google or Facebook here? Before I disparage them, is Google here? No? Okay, I can speak freely then?
You have
All
to
right.
be angry.
Me?
All right, all
Thanks, here.
right. So, what? No, I'm sort of kidding. But what we have in the market is we have Google and Facebook kind of dominating user attention, time, and traffic. And so this means that increasingly people are really reselling third-party traffic and buying traffic at a premium from these sites. And while it's a service to the small business advertiser, it's really a challenge for the publisher in a lot of ways in terms of profitability. Can you elaborate on that and how this funnel approach gets beyond that?
Yeah, so this is actually a journey that we've made in the last year, working with our partner that start selling those bundles that really cover the entire funnel. And what we were noticing is that there was a lot of effort on selling top funnel, i.e. traffic and presence, where essentially this is where the service provider has least effect, because the SMB has a limited budget. Most of this budget would actually go to feed the search, the Facebook or Google. And as a service provider, your way to optimize it is limited. I mean, you can do a slightly better job than somebody else, but at the end, you can't really drive more and more visitors and more traffic unless the SMB is enlarging his budget considerably. On the other hand, what we saw is that this funnel is really leaking. I mean, a lot of this traffic is actually going away in the conversion and retention phases. And think of the plumber who's getting a call. Maybe he got called that someone saw his telephone on an ad, but he's now doing a service for, and he doesn't have the time to answer the call. So he just say, well, I'll call you later. The customer would probably call another plumber, or the plumber would forget about calling him later. It's a bad service all around, and essentially this is where the funnel is leaking.
And the service provider, the publisher, gets blamed for the failure of that traffic to convert.
Because the SMB at the end of the day say, well, yeah, I'm getting calls, but they're not meaningful. They're not really contributing to my business. So we believe that the service provider actually need to focus. People were talking here about service. It's actually about helping SMBs move or use those online tools to actually manage their business better and provide better all-around service to their customers. And I think that this would be the key to kind of change the, turn around the total dependency on Facebook, on Google, on the traffic generators.
Do we have questions or people want to dispute any of this stuff? Comment? It's in the back.
Question back there, Steph.
Yeah.
Way back.
I should say, just by way of follow-up to Zib's point, that roughly 80% of revenue to small businesses comes from existing, not new customers.
Can I ask a question, please? So, completely believe in the approach, but questioning if you're using a vertical approach to the funnel, and how do you balance that with the simplification and a sales rep dealing with multiple verticals?
Great question, and actually I think that this has a lot to do with bundling, because part of the problem, and I think Harold were showing this zodiac of tool or deck of cards that the SMBs, that the salespeople now needs to go to in order to understand the different product that he's selling, and verticalization is actually ties into that, in that once the SMB need to think about, okay, what do I need from all of this? I have a fixed budget. In Israel, we're saying that SMBs has 2,000 shekels a month. Now, surprisingly so, websites would cost 2,000 shekels, SEO would cost 2,000 shekels, and a minimum social media management would cost 2,000 shekels. But he only has those 2,000 shekels. So on which one will he spend it? Once you put the SMB in such a decision, you are likely to lose him. However, if you can offer an all-in-one bundle, which essentially in one price, he gets all of the different options. This also answers the issue of verticalization, because A service-oriented SMB would have access to booking and call me back features, while a product or sales-oriented would have access to commerce and orders and coupons. And at least what our partners are experiencing, that by offering these bundles, which are not really trying to say to the SMB, you need to choose this product or the other. We're giving you all of them in one integrated, use whatever you need, but in a very attractive price. This has actually simplified both the sales process, increased the success. I mean, some of our partners are reporting selling twice as much packages as opposed to when they were trying to sell point solutions.
So I know Brendan King is in the room. I'm going to put him on the spot. So we had an informal conversation last night about this idea of selling a kind of a customer journey model or a platform rather than individual products. And you're another person who's gone through a kind of a similar transformation with your business. Can you reflect on the sort of ideas being expressed here? What do you agree? Do you disagree? What is your observation about the market been?
Yeah, thanks for putting me on the spot.
That's my job.
Of course, we agree that there's a different way to sell to small businesses, and we think that it's a mixed model. So, depending on your sales force and the average revenue or cost of acquisition, you have to have a different method. So, you can have a telesales all the way through to in-premise sales, and what the needs of the small business are different. So those smaller businesses that have more time and money would prefer to have a do-it-yourself model and service model, where those businesses that have more money than time and want a do-it-for-me model, you have to have a platform that can transition across all of those models and a way to deliver those products and sell those products in that way. So I think it's an interesting conversation. We're seeing it happen. As media companies here in this room have to be able to compete with the GoDaddies and the folks that are selling the low end, all the way to the folks that are coming in on the high end that are trying to steal the dollars there. So you have to have a platform that can really handle that across the spectrum.
One of the points that was made in the slides and that we heard a little bit about, but we're not going to go into in depth, is the demand for self-service. Because it does exist in North America, it doesn't exist equally around the country, around the world, but it's an interesting point. One final comment I think that's important to bring out is, what is the sales process like with this approach? I mean, what do people actually say in that sales call or that meeting? Can you elaborate a little bit about that based on what you're seeing from the market, from your partners?
So yeah, I don't have the actual transcripts that our partner are using, but we do, part of what we do when we work with a new partner is help him try to build and create the right bundle of services for his country and culture and specific ways of addressing SMBs. And what we are hearing, I mean, we're actually talking, we have a customer success team which is constantly talking to our customers and helping them in those processes. And what they're telling us is that their customers are now saying, instead of having to go to the SMBs and try to, as I think Harold was saying, try to talk products, they're essentially talking about how they can help him manage his business better and saying, look, we're giving you everything. It's like an all-you-can-eat, whatever and not just that, but the packages are also growing, meaning you're buying this package now. In a year from now, we'll add additional tools and services for you, and you will not have to make this choice,
But those aren't being sold separately as standalone a la carte items.
No, those are sold, as I said, sold as a bundle. And call it a live bundle because it's actually would grow at the time, which actually gives the SMB a feel that he's constantly getting additional value. And the way why they are able to do this is because essentially they pay us the same for this growing number of tools that we provide.
Okay, we don't have any more questions in the room. So Ziv is exhibiting, and this report is available. I wrote this report, and you can talk to me about it in more detail if you're interested. I will provide more information in the slides that Cinda will make available to you, so more than what you saw today. And please join me in thanking Ziv and Camilio for the discussion.
That's great.